2007 was a very interesting year for Valve Corporation. It was the year they released 3 brand new games on the same day under the Orange Box. One of those was Team Fortress 2, surviving a rocky 9 years of development. Little would they know they'd continue developing it for just as long, thanks to some good design and a number of intelligent business decisions. As TF2 marched into the modern day, its identity evolved. The question is, was that for the better? Also, here's a fun game. Take a shot every time that I mention new hats. Team Fortress 2 is an online class-based shooter with a focus on playing objectives. Though it began as a military shooter, it would end up much more akin to its Quake mod roots. TF2 differentiated itself with 9 playable classes, each injected with personality and distinct playstyles. At launch, the game had 6 maps, yeah, just 6, across 4 game modes. The game's Orange Box release on the 10th of October 2007 was met with great praise. Fans and critics alike enjoyed its mechanical depth, the charm in its characters and humour, and the distinct 20th century poster illustration style. In fact, it gained somewhat of a cult following, spawning a community of YouTube animators who used Gary's mod. The game's launch was a success, and its player base substantial thanks to its Orange Box inclusion. As Call of Duty would take the console world by storm, introducing paid downloadable content and map packs, TF2 received maps and updates for free. Valve justified this brazenly. Segregating players into groups that can't play together based on who bought what is something we'd like to avoid. However, these updates would not grace the console versions of the game due to complications with those platforms. The Gold Rush update in early 2008 came first, adding a new game mode, Payload, which would become a TF2 staple, and a new map to go with it. Valve also introduced an item system, where new weapons could be unlocked via achievements. Additional weapons would prove incredibly important for the game's overall replayability and depth. Weapon options reduced the number of hard counters to each class, opened up alternate playstyles, and shifted the dynamic of fights. For example, the Dead Ringer, a weapon which allows the spy to feign death. This gave combat against spies another degree of complexity, as their death was now uncertain regardless of whether or not they were actually using the Dead Ringer. Class-based updates through 2008 and 9 would follow Gold Rush's precedent, introducing new weapons and new game modes such as Arena, Payload Race, and King of the Hill. Many new maps were created by members of the community, harkening back to the series' modding roots. I have to say, after the last video, this sort of mod support is a relief. Community content would play a major part in TF2's history. In May, the Sniper vs Spy update bundled 2 class updates in one. Items could now be earned through random drops, which created an idler problem. Basically, people would leave inactive accounts online to get free items, and idle servers would persist through most of TF2's life. But hey, forget all that, they added hats!
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
2009 concluded with a Halloween update featuring a themed map and hats. However, this merely set the precedent for future Halloween events. In the space of 2 years, Valve introduced 4 game modes, 17 maps, and 18 weapons to Team Fortress 2. Calling this productive would be an understatement. Players were given a taste of community-made content, Halloween events, and hats. Though it was early days yet, Valve would soon take the class-based updates to the next level. War! The War update pits Soldier and Demoman players against each other to get the most kills. Both sides received new weapons, but Demo players got the more significant ones with the Eyelander and Charge and Targe. Combining these created a melee-focused build which fans dubbed the Demo Knight, the first subclass in the game. Valve also hosted a propaganda contest, released new maps, and let users craft items. At the event's end, the kill counts were tallied. In total, 6,372,979 soldiers were killed, and 6,406,065 demo men were killed, crowning Soldier the winner who would receive the gunboats, an essential item for rocket jumping. The theming of this update would make it one of the most fondly remembered in TF2's history. Now, 2010 was a busy year for TF2. You see, in the days before Dota 2 and Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Team Fortress 2 was top dog, and was therefore Valve's lab rat for testing wider Steam features. This was the first year that user-made items and promotional pre-order hats would be available. The game also received Mac support alongside Portal, with Linux support added in several years' time. Cue the engineer updates Sentry modifications via the Wrangler and the Gunslinger. 2 of the 3 new maps, Upward and Hightower, would become fan favourites. TF2 would once again herald in a new Steam feature. This time it was the Steam Wallet with the Manconomy update. In-game items could now be customised, purchased and traded for. A small selection of community-made hats were added to the Manco store, and these made $39,000 to $47,000 in their first 2 weeks of sale, each. Newly added crates would drop for free, which could be opened with buyable keys. This established the basis for the TF2 economy. Yes, you heard that right, a TF2 economy. In fact, this economy would create the foundation for Steam's evolution as a digital goods empire, as seen in CSGO and Dota 2. This economy isn't easily explained, so I'll stick to the basics. Weapons drop for free and can be crafted into metal, which can be used to randomly craft hats. So metal is naturally generated in the economy. Everyone has access to crates, arguably too much, but the keys are sparse as they can only be bought for $2.50. As new hats are added to crates, more people buy keys. What Valve effectively made was an economy where anyone could trade up to get what they wanted, from weapon drops alone. And most people desired an unusual hat, which was a super rare variant only available from crates. Inflated worth on digital items. That is how you do a digital economy. 2010 saw the first ever Scream Fortress, which featured a new boss fight that rewarded players with new items. The frenzy of free items established Scream Fortress as a yearly staple. 3 years in, TF2 had cemented itself as Steam's biggest shooter. The game was refined with the addition of new weapons, hats and subclasses, as well as Scream Fortress and Christmas events. The success of the TF Comics and Meet the Team videos helped to promote the game. Valve also used the game to test on new fronts, with Mac support, secondary income from cosmetics, and trading, all of which saw great success. TF2 established itself as a guinea pig for Valve's future tests, and this would take them very far, very soon. Busy years, you say? Step aside, 2011 is here. Updates from here onwards would more often than not include weapons and hats. Lots of hats. In fact, one update was called the Hatless Update just to jab at this. The following month, the Replay Update allowed players to save replays of matches, shocker, that could be edited later with different camera angles. So of course this demanded a filmmaking competition. In the Saxxy Awards, Steam users voted for their favourite replays, and the winners were given a Saxxy, a unique melee weapon that turned enemies to gold. The Saxxys would become a yearly tradition, much like Scream Fortress. This update also introduced equipable taunts with the director's vision. Alright, here's the one you were waiting for, the Uber update. In June 2011, Team Fortress 2 went free to play. 19 new weapons were added alongside Meet the Spy, the objective Best Meet the Team video. And when I say free to play, I mean that all maps, modes and classes were available from the get-go. Weapons had to be obtained via weapon drops or trading, but all gameplay elements were free for all. Sales from the Manco store would be the main source of income, which raises the question, did Valve plan this all along? This business model would prove very lucrative. By 2013, in-game items would make more money than base game sales preceding the Uber update. This transition was praised for being so welcoming to free players. All in all, the Uber update was an overwhelming success. Not only did it bring in new players to TF2, it also brought new customers to the Steam platform. The low system requirements allowed users without dedicated gaming rigs to play, and if you want proof of its impact, well, it's what made me a PC gamer. The potential for potato PC players to peruse the platform ensured an effective ensnaring environment. Now, as with any major change, there were consequences. The success of the update set a precedent for microtransactions and randomized loot boxes that would run rampant through the games industry for years to come. The influx of new players also sparked a divide in the player base. Older players looked down in scorn upon the free-to-plays, who lacked the experience, teamwork, and high fashion of their paid peers. Despite these shortcomings, the Uber update was perhaps the most significant update in creating what is now considered modern TF2. Trading was soon expanded to function across the entire Steam platform, and the addition of the community market the following year legitimized the sale of in-game items for money, a core pillar of Valve's business strategy. By the time the workshop was added and users could vote for items to be added to the game, Valve had paid out a combined $2 million to item creators. This high-profile success gave the workshop a strong start. This update also saw the high five taunt added, the first of many social taunts. 2012 saw a 6-month break in major updates. Now, if you're coming hot off the heels of the last video, you might think that that's a long time. Well, not for Valve. The game was still being patched consistently, and some big stuff was right around the corner. The long-awaited final Meet the Team video released with the Pyromania update. A new Gamemodes special delivery released alongside it, but it wouldn't really pick up. Most importantly, Pyromania saw the public release of Source Filmmaker, a full in-engine animation tool which Valve used to produce the Meet the Team videos. Oh, and it was free. This unprecedented move resulted in a massive YouTube animation scene similar to the Gmod one. It also revolutionized the Saxxy Awards, which became a showcase of the community's best filmmaking efforts. I'm personally a huge fan of SFM videos, so much so that I've made a playlist of some of my favourites through the years, which you can find in the description. What followed was the much-teased Man vs. Machine. MVM is a cooperative mode where players fight waves of robots to unlock new robotic cosmetic items. Despite the great length of rounds, or perhaps due to their length, the mode would prove incredibly popular. Another update later in the year would build upon the concept, and that was 2012. With the end of the year, so concluded another era of Team Fortress 2. Hype around the game reached its peak, with more players than ever, and the major additions of Source Filmmaker and Man vs. Machine. Going free to play gave the game second wind, and allowed Valve to test features like the workshop and community market. The economy through these years was in full form, and the community influence would continue to increase come 2013. With increasing community involvement, a full community-made update was inevitable. Robotic Boogaloo added more than 50 robotic versions of existing hats. Luckily, community updates arrived right as Valve updates finally began to slow down. Patches persisted, but a 10-month break until Scream Fortress says it all. Shortly after, 2 cities arrived as the last major Man vs. Machine update, despite the mode's success. And that was sort of it for 2013. It was a quieter year as work shifted to the community. Valve was not a big company, and they were stretched thin between development on Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Dota 2, and the new Steam machines. 2014 began on a controversial note. Quick play allowed users to quickly jump into standard matches, but tight restrictions in official Valve servers put community ones at risk, hurting small communities and the custom map scene. The major community servers began using more intrusive ads and premium features to get by, which only turned more people away. Though quick play was convenient, many attribute it to the death of innumerable communities. I personally remember logging onto community servers and chatting to the usuals. That does still exist today, but not nearly to the same extent. 6 months would pass before the Love and War update, and it was a big one. A new 15-minute fully voice-acted short, several social taunts including flipping, rock paper scissors, the conga. This dancing taunt created absolute chaos. In the days following the update, you'd be lucky to complete a match, because at some point a conga would spontaneously break out between both teams. Dancing became a defining feature of Team Fortress 2. Love and War also introduced some new weapons, the most interesting of these being the Tide Turner. Earlier in the year, popular TF2 creator Star demonstrated that the Demo Knight's charge move was linked to the game's frame rate, giving some players an unfair advantage. Soon after, it was patched and the Tide Turner was introduced to make it a genuine feature. This is just one of many examples of the YouTube TF2 community influencing the game's balance and features. A beta program for new maps was also introduced, but would soon be neglected. You may have also noticed that some characters' newer voice lines in-game and in the short sounded different.
USA! USA!
Well, by this point, TF2 was 7 years old. A lot can change in 7 years, and many of the original voice actors' voices were changing with age. It's an interesting situation, as very few games ever last so long for this to be noticeable. Meanwhile, something strange was happening with the game's economy. The price of keys was increasing as a result of idle accounts increasing the total supply of metal in the economy. As metal lost its value, traders panic-switched their metal reserves to keys. The increase of metal supply and demand for keys resulted in dramatic key price inflation. In 2013, a key was worth about 2.5 refined metal. By the end of 2014, it was worth 28 refined. Keys soon made finite currencies like earbuds and Bill's hats worthless, and the devaluation of metal made it much more difficult for new players to get into trading. However, the year was not yet done, as another major community update was just around the corner. End of the Line began life as a trailer for a fan-made Source filmmaker short, which drew Valve's eye. This update was greatly hyped for its upcoming new weapons and new payload/control point hybrid map. Over a year later, when the update finally landed, well, people liked the short. The update was scaled back greatly, with the only gameplay addition being duck journals, an item which kept track of how many ducks you picked up during the event. The new weapons were scrapped, and the map, Snowplow, was rejected by Valve for being, and I quote, "too confusing for new players." Valve did not make many fans that day. So concluded a somewhat underwhelming chapter in TF2's life. The community updates in this year were impressive, but couldn't meet the clout of Valve-made updates. It didn't help that Valve employees moved to other projects, slowing the rate of updates. TF2 would also lose its spot as top dog to CSGO and Dota 2. Team Fortress 2 reached its peak in 2011 and 2012, and no matter what, nothing could bring that back. But that didn't mean that the game couldn't still improve. 2014 saw a considerable Christmas update, with the new Manpower game mode. It would prove to be a confusing mix of grappling hooks and power-ups, relegating it to the same fate as Special Delivery, Arena, and Territorial Control. Later in the year, another mode called Pastime, developed in part by J.J. Abrams' studio Bad Robot, yes, that one, would suffer a similar fate. The 3 new weapons, on the other hand, were significant, as they would be the last new weapons for a long time. The TF team, recognizing the imbalance across the now massive selection of weapons, opted to level the playing field instead of adding even more. It would also put less strain on a smaller TF team. 7 months later, Gunmetal launched. This time, TF2 would be the one taking notes from other Valve games. The new contract pass costed $6 and would reward weapon skins for completing contracts. Yeah, this one was taken from CSGO. Gunmetal saw TF2's Guinea Pig Torch passed on to CSGO and Dota 2, its more popular peers. This update also introduced the first complete Valve-made map in a long time, excluding Man vs. Machine. 3 new community maps were added, oh hey, Snowplow, along with new taunts and a laundry list of weapon changes. The update was received fairly well, but the rewards for contract drew some ire. You see, completing contracts rewarded crates, which required keys to open. Essentially, you had to spend money on both the contract pass and its rewards. This put a lot of people off of the concept. Now, I've held off talking about the game's art style until now. As time progressed, new items and aesthetics crept into TF2 as part of a gradual shift towards player expression. Between promotional items and workshop contributions, TF2 now had samurai gear, sci-fi weaponry, Hong Kong fashion items, boomboxes and hoodies, pirate clothes, and a virtual reality headset. The reason I waited to discuss this? Well, the potassium bonnet, a banana hat. This was the tipping point for many who lamented the purity of the game's original art style.
Through very intentional art direction, this goal was supported by designing characters with distinct silhouettes that can be easily identified even with no lighting cues.
The broad selection of hats and unusual effects also impacted the game's overall performance. There is no denying that TF2 in 2007 was better optimized than it is today. The next update was Invasion, another community-made update. Again, it's amazing that this work was undertaken by community members, and it really was done by the community, as Valve offered minimal additional support for this one. One map used a text-to-speech program as a temporary announcer, which Valve decided to leave in for release.
We are in the beam!
As such, it became a joke in the community which represented Valve's lack of input to the game. Scream Fortress this year would lack a new boss, instead shifting focus to Halloween-based contracts. Scream Fortress events from this point onwards would no longer have new bosses. At the end of the year, the Tough Break update, as you'd imagine, introduced some harsh downgrades to weapons. Some of these reduced the combo potential for the Pyro and Demoman, which was a sore topic at the time. This update met a mixed reception as it retread a lot of gunmetal steps by including new contracts, weapon skins, taunts, and community maps. This also meant that it inherited its problems, especially in regards to the contract system. Look, I know I'm being awful negative here, but this really wasn't a high point in TF2's life. The TF team had shrunk considerably over the years, though how much was unknown at the time. There was also the looming threat of a competitor, Overwatch. Clearly inspired by TF2, Overwatch had the benefit of market hype and of Blizzard Entertainment's undivided attention. Many were worried that Team Fortress 2 couldn't compete. Thankfully, the TF team were working on something that would hopefully abate any concerns. A big part of Overwatch's marketing push was from its competitive format. Where Blizzard pushed for esports support from the get-go, TF2 had a small community-run scene. Valve provided in-game badges for events, but money for events was a different story. When TF2 released in 2007, competitive scenes were unusual, so the TF team had to take notes from their competitive peers CSGO and Dota 2. Meet Your Match was the answer to the competitive question, and well... This update was massively disappointing, which especially pains me as a lapsed fan. So, where do we start? Quick Play was replaced with Casual Mode, which added a party system and map selection via the Game Coordinator. Some people liked the party system, but just as many missed the drop-in, drop-out atmosphere of pubs, or public servers. The Game Coordinator was also used in the competitive mode, which is a shame because it didn't work. The tool was offline through most of its first days, turning away many from the start. It was also riddled with bugs and balance issues. Comp mode offered 6v6 matches, but lacked Highlander, a popular one-person per class mode. This was likely done to avoid splitting the player base, but that split already happened a long time ago. It didn't help that one of the new maps, Swiftwater, was built for Highlander and was therefore too large for 6v6 games. Pastime released to little fanfare, and the general balance changes were a mixed bag. Some of them, like the quality of life improvements for the engineer and medic, were good. Then we have the Righteous Bison, which had a feature removed because the TF team mistook it for a bug, despite the fact that it was in the game's tooltips. This demonstrated just how much the game had shifted hands over the years. So, why did the update flop? Perhaps it was team size. The following year, developers at Valve confirmed that the TF team consisted of 16 people, 5 of them programmers.
I just decided to ask Jill straight up how many game programmers are specifically working on Team Fortress 2 right now, and he said that the answer can vary depending on how you define the word programmer, but he said that the number is about 4 to 5 programmers, with the rest being those artists, writers, level designers, and sound engineers that Driller was talking about.
Perhaps it was ignorance. Despite its extensive beta testing, many community requests were ignored, such as for CSGO's successful placement match system. Also consider that they later removed 2 popular competitive maps and replaced them with casual ones. If there's a low point in TF2's history, it's probably here. Meet Your Match also had a heavy versus pyro event, with the winning side receiving new items in the next update. When Meet Your Match concluded, Pyro was declared the winner. In the following months, skepticism grew in the community after the failure of Meet Your Match. A number of Pyro Highlander players created an open letter to Valve, which highlighted various technical issues with the class, hoping that Valve would listen. And listen, they did. After 10 months and 29 days of waiting, the longest wait for a major update in the game's history, the Jungle Inferno update arrived. With 5 community maps, a new Valve-made map, 8 new taunts, countless cosmetics, and a new contract system which rewarded skins without keys, it was a strong start. Valve also addressed many of the issues with Pyro detailed in the open letter, and introduced 4 new weapons to the class to raise the skill ceiling. These were the first new weapons in nearly 3 years. A plethora of balance changes introduced many fundamental changes to weapons. Most of these changes were well received, and made more weapons viable than ever before. They also reverted changes to the Righteous Bison and other popular quests, such as making Demoman's bottle break once more. The TF team took their time to listen to the community, and it paid off, even if they couldn't deliver on all fronts. There were no competitive changes in Jungle Inferno, but Comp would receive a major update a few months later, introducing placement matches alongside many other general improvements. However, it did very little to change the poor reputation that Meet Your Match had given the mode. If Meet Your Match was the downfall, Jungle Inferno was the comeback. It wasn't a perfect update, but it was evidence enough that the TF team still had it in them to further improve the game. And that brings us to today. Yes, this is the first In-Flux where the game in question is still being updated. That fact alone says a lot about Team Fortress 2's success. Over the past 10 years, it's seen over 600 updates, 400 community items, and more than 100 new maps. It's still possible to play the original 2007 release of TF2 with a custom client, which I installed to make a more direct comparison between then and now. There is no denying that the original version of TF2 had a much cleaner art style and superior performance. This version of the game represented a time when Valve were fully committed to it. However, in the intervening time, map design improved significantly, with many original maps being sidelined in favour of more recent community ones. The game's balance has also greatly improved, with more weapon options than ever, fundamentally shifting the core dynamic of the game. Popular aspects of TF2 such as subclassing, friendlies, and the competitive scene wouldn't exist for another few years, nor would the established Gmod and Source Filmmaker communities. Over the years, Team Fortress 2 lost its cohesive art style, witnessed the failure of many of its game modes, and lost its top spot to its peers. It has also seen immense success with a free-to-play model, experimental new Steam features, Source Filmmaker, Man vs Machine, and it remains profitable to this day via cosmetic payments. Though the game's identity has changed significantly over the years, I think that most people can agree that these changes were for the better. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing, and I've put the playlist of my favourite Source Filmmaker videos in the description.